Well, certainly, Griselda, it was quite a very pivotal moment from Botswana's newly minted President Boko, talking about the challenges facing the African continent, but also really talking about the issues pertaining to peace and security in the continent. You might have seen recently that within the SADC region, for example, you have a country like Mozambique that is facing a political stalemate in light of those elections that we saw in October, and we're still waiting for the Constitutional Council to validate those results. But also, President Boko really talked about a number of issues around economic growth in the African continent, saying that it's high time for the continent to leverage on its natural resources. In fact, one of very key members from the UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, talking about the issue of making sure that the African continent is able to diversify its economies as opposed to relying on one resource for the economy. And we know that in Botswana, for example, Griselda, that has been a very big issue, to make sure that as much as the diamond is a very good, precious mineral, but it's quite important to really rely on other sectors, whether you're looking at tourism, but also looking at arts and culture. I mean, this is a country that is really just rich in terms of its heritage, but also those are some of the cases really that are coming really quite sharply here in this particular conference. But like you just alluded, Griselda, it was quite important for President Boko to emphasize the issue of saying that solutions should come out here as opposed to flattery, but also very frank and very candid about some of the challenges really that are facing the world, whether you're looking at the current conflicts between Russia and Ukraine, and the very ramifications and the consequences for the African continent when it comes to food security. But another very major point that has been raised by the delegates is for Africa to mobilize its own resources and be able, for example, to look at the game changers like the African Continental Free Trade Area. How can Africa be able to tap into the opportunities that are presented by that very key continental instrument? But of course, obviously, Griselda, there are still challenges with the conflict. The prerequisite is around peace and security.
Right, so Khayelihle, amongst, obviously, I think there would also be an opportunity for various countries to talk about, relations between various countries, how that can also be strengthened on the backdrop, of course, of Botswana's new president, and how some of them could even be fostered to greater heights.
Well, absolutely. A very critical message, especially because just a short while ago, Griselda, I think there was a sense of gratitude in terms of how, for example, the elections were conducted here in Botswana, the peaceful nature of these elections, but also the smooth transition from former President Mokgweetsi Masisi to the current president now, Duma Boko, really talking about a country that has always been known as a shining example. But of course, we know that for 2024, it's been a very fascinating year, Griselda, where we've seen a wave of these elections in Mauritius, Mozambique. Again, obviously, Mozambique with some challenges, the post-election violence, a number of the member states as well within the SADC, for example, pointing out to the issue of making sure that the principles and guidelines of the region should be taken into account and fully implemented to achieve really the true reflection of the will of the people. But we know that when you look at the continental-wide issues, for example, Ghana will go to the elections in December, and not far from where we are in Namibia. In fact, as a matter of couple of days in Namibia, they'll be having elections. But also a very important issue here, Griselda, also is around the developmental partners of the African continent. You do have the United Nations Development Program and the United Nations Economic for Africa, really talking about an array of issues in terms of making sure that Africa is able to realize its enormous potential. I mean, after all, this is a continent that is blessed with the young population, the vibrancy thereof. So understanding the issue of making sure that when leaders are crafting the solutions, also they include the young people to be able to really just make sure that they reap the demographic dividends, but also apart from that, be able to understand their issues. I mean, for example, a number of countries in the African continent are battling around skills development, where unemployment levels are skyrocketing. So this is also just another opportunity for the decision makers to look at ways of recalibrating, of also making sure that they are able to find very, very good solutions in this regard.
Khayelihle Khumalo, thank you very much indeed. Live to us from Gaborone in Botswana, of course, at that very important 2024 African Economic Conference.